Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Kelly Knowles, Senior Political Director for the ABA, and I have the distinct privilege of serving as the ABA Executive Leadership Development Committee Staff Liaison. I'm thrilled with the terrific turnout this evening for what promises to be an outstanding opportunity and venue here at IBIE 2013 to showcase the tremendous leadership we are fortunate to have within the ABA membership. Before we begin the program, I would like to take a few moments to recognize this evening's sponsors and ABA allied partners. When I call your name, please, all employees in attendance, please stand and remain standing. BCW Food Products. Milner Milling. Bella Rise. Conagra Mills. And the Society of Bakery Women. Many thanks to our sponsors for helping us make this a successful evening. I would also like to recognize a few distinguished guests in attendance with us tonight. Please stand when I call your name. Kerwin Brown, President of BEMA. Christine Cochran, Executive Director, Grain Foods Foundation. Rick McGrath, President, Allied Trades of the Baking Industry. Robin Alton, ABA Chairman. Kent Van Amberg, President, American Society of Baking. Andre Bion, President, AIB International. And last but never least, Rob Mackey, President and CEO, ABA. Thank you for being here. Now on to introducing our panel. Our first industry leader alleviates her stress when she's out on the ocean deep sea fishing. Her newest passion to join tennis, cycling, and golf as a way to disconnect and enjoy the outdoors. Paula Marshall is CEO of the Bama Companies, and when asked which three people, living or deceased, she would like to gather all together for dinner, she chose her parents, Bama plant manager Pat George, and good friend Dr. Edward Deming. Bama provides frozen baked goods to large-scale restaurant chains, including the nation's largest hamburger chain, pizza chain, and the nation's largest retailer. Paula also finds time to write books and is the author of Finding the Soul of Big Business and Sweet as Pie, Tough as Nails. Her newest release, The Executive Entrepreneur, was co-authored with New York Times bestselling author Jim Stovall. Please welcome Paula Marshall. When I asked our next panelist who he would invite for dinner and gather all together, former President Ronald Reagan, Ayn Rand, and Sir Winston Churchill topped his list. And that would be a fascinating discussion for sure. When he isn't spending time with his 7 grandchildren, including 5 little girls who he and his wife Brenda hosted last weekend, Miles Jones serves as co-chairman of Dawn Food Products. Miles was elected to the Baking Hall of Fame in 2007 and is the second generation of his family to lead the company. Dawn Food Products is headquartered in Jackson, Michigan, and has grown to supply the global baking industry in over 70 countries. Ladies and gentlemen, Miles Jones. Our next panelist is an expert fly fisherman and has passed his love for the sport along to his wife Angie and 3 daughters. Mike McKee is the president and CEO of McKee Foods Corporation. McKee Foods is a family-owned and managed company founded in 1934 and manufactures some of America's most beloved brands, including Little Debbie, Sunbelt, Heartland, and Drake's. Mike very recently welcomed the birth of his first grandchild, a baby girl. So clearly, if you need any pointers, Mike, you should consult with Miles. Please join me in welcoming Mike McKee. Our final panelist is a self-described audiophile and thoroughly enjoys listening to his music collection featuring Miles Davis, Ronnie Earl, and Robin Trower. Fred Penny is a 33-year veteran of the baking industry and currently serves as president of the nation's largest baker, Bimbo Bakeries USA, the U.S. corporate arm of Mexico's Grupo Bimbo, the largest baker in the world. Fred, who was born in Germany, told me he most enjoys spending time with his lovely wife, Amy, and sharing hobbies together like golf, skiing, and travel. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm ELDC welcome to Fred Penny. Interacting and partnering with the ABA membership is hands down the best part of my job. As ELDC staff liaison, I am very lucky to have top-rate volunteer leaders in the ELDC co-chairs, Connie Vaughn with McKee Foods Corporation and Pete Frederick Milner Milling. Connie and Pete are graciously serving as moderators of our panel this evening. And with that, I now turn the program over to Connie Vaughn.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here. So I get to ask the first question, and Fred, you're up. So thank you for being here. I know your arm is sore from Kelly twisting it, and
Kelly had it behind my back for a week or two.
A week or two. He graciously accepted to come and speak. So you've had quite a bit of success in your 33 years in the baking industry. What would you describe as the core strengths needed to be an effective leader?
Well, lots been written about leadership, and certainly everybody in the room, I'm sure, has had their share of advice on leadership over your careers. I've got a few that I've always sort of relied on. I think integrity is number one on the list. If you don't have integrity, it's kind of everything else after that is difficult. A willingness to be a team player. I think a desire and an enjoyment of seeing people succeed and being a promoter of talent and a developer of talent, because at the end of the day, all of our companies are all about the people in the organization and their success. And I think the last thing that's important is that you really have to be, if you're going to lead in any organization, you have to, at various points in the journey, be willing to take risks. And you have to be able to drive change when it may be difficult to drive change. And certainly in my career, I guess looking back, I've had the opportunity to run some businesses that at the time I took them over were losing quite a bit of money, and that sort of gives you an incentive to learn how to drive change and take risk. So I would cite those as some of the core beliefs that I have.
Good, thank you.
The first question I have tonight is for Paula. Paula, can you impart some wisdom and talk about something you've learned sort of along the way in your career that would have made decision-making easier? In other words, is there something you know now that you wish you had known then?
Oh, goodness. Well, I mean, we can all look back and say, I wish I'd done this or I wish I'd done that. But I think I learned early on because I was lucky enough to take over from a very authoritarian father who ran the business with a very big iron fist. And when I came in, I admittedly was very insecure, and I did not know how to do what he did, the way he did it. So I began asking people to tell me what they thought. And little did I know, 2 years later, some reporter was coming in and asking me, how did you know how to do this thing called participative management? And I was like, is that what I'm doing? I had no idea. To me, it's a matter of having the humility to admit that you don't know everything and to gather as much input from your team members and then from their team members and on down. I think if I could go back, I would say that I would enter every decision with as much humility as I could and ask as many questions and ask people to help me.
Yeah.
Not be afraid to ask for help.
Good. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so next question, Mike, I have for you. And if you could impart some advice for the audience, and included in the audience today is Mike's daughter, Brittany, starting our fourth generation at McKee, so we're excited about that. So thinking about some advice for the audience to take away today on growing leadership potential, what would you say?
My background, education, was technical in nature. I was an engineer in college, MBA, so very technical education. And so early in my career, I approached most problems with a lot of logic and rationale and sort of linear thinking. And later in life, I got interested in what you would call the humanities, subjects, topics that I really didn't care for in school. So history, biographies, the sciences, and so on. And I really got interested in those because I was curious about human nature. Why do people think the way they do? Why do they make the decisions the way they do? Why do they believe the things they did? And what I found is that expanded my horizons and understanding of human nature. So for me, that was a big plus because leadership, a lot of leadership is about human nature. Connecting with people, understanding what motivates them, what's holding them back, and so on. And so my advice is if you're from a technical field and you didn't enjoy history in school, you know, it might be an area for your reading. I'll be honest, I don't read a whole lot of business books. My reading list looks a whole lot more like a college liberal arts curriculum today. And so that was something I stumbled on, but was a great help for me. Now, if you're from a liberal arts background, I'm not sure what to advise. But we have a lot of technical people in the audience, I'm sure. So that was something that I found very helpful to me.
Miles, the baking industry is such a great career field. Can you share some advice for the group out here, specifically the young leaders that are out there coming up into the ranks of the business of the baking industry? Just impart some advice to the young leaders up there that are coming up through the ranks of the baking industry.
Sure. I think it's necessary as an up-and-coming young executive with leadership ambition to networking within the industry is extremely important. If you're an executive or would like to be an executive leader and you're a baker, then you ought to be a member of the ABA if you're not, and the ELDC. I would recommend reading a lot, although I must say, Mike, my reading habits are much like your own, and partially because of time constraints. I also think it's important to talk with leaders in the industry who have succeeded and pick their brains to see how it is they succeeded, how it is they solved their problems, how they decided to grow, and how they managed that growth. And I think it's also important as a leader and as a manager in industry, and not only in the baking industry, but in any business. I think it's important to stay sensitive to the people that you're working with and who are working for you. I mean, my brother and I often talk about the fact that these people that we work with spend more of their waking hours with us than they do with their own families. That imparts a lot of responsibility on us to make their time with us decent time, satisfying time, and profitable time to spend with us.
As Connie and I went through the questions, this next question we thought would be good for everybody on the panel to answer. And Fred, if I could, I'd like to start with you. Is there a learning that stands out in your career that you remember well that you'd be willing to share with us? And what were the takeaways from that particular learning?
I have to preface the answer here because we were doing some prep work earlier, and Pete substituted the word learning for mistake. It originally was a question around a mistake in your career, and I boldly raised my hand and said, I'll take that one. So I'm sure we've all had our mistakes, but it really is about learning. And I'll just cite this one. When I was running the Entenmann's business, and many of you it may resonate with many of you, there was this thing called Atkins that came along. Not too dissimilar to some of the things that are going on in our industry now with these various books that are out there. But in any event, Atkins came along, and it was a really big deal for a short time. And many CPG companies aggressively went after Atkins carb types of reduced carb or carb-free products, sugar-free products, etc. And there was a lot of noise in the trade, in the business. Customers wanted it, consumers wanted it. And so in our business, we decided to jump in and come out with Atkins products, endorsed by Atkins. And obviously, in retrospect, that was a huge failure because most of the companies that went in ended up writing off millions of dollars of product that never sold as the Atkins fad went away. In retrospect, it's easy to second-guess that decision, but to me, the important thing, the learning out of that was, don't be too quick to jump on the next fad, and be kind of thoughtful and thorough about what you see happening in the industry. It's easy to chase a fad, but it can be very painful. And I will tell you, for our company in that year, it was financially extremely painful. Mm-hmm. And it was just a point in time in my journey when, had I thought more about what this might have been, we might have backed off and said, we're not going to chase this one. Yeah. But all of us at that time took away a lot of learning, and much of it was a little painful.
Yeah. Thank you, Fred. Paula, would you mind going next?
Yeah, I think every mistake that I've made has happened because I didn't spend the time on the front end working on the research, the plan. I'm a doer. I'm not great with strategic thinking, and so over the years I've had to develop that skill within myself. But I think jumping in too fast, too quickly, pushing our organization before it was ready to do things was a mistake. Now, there's a certain balance when you talk about human nature and our fears, and are we going to let our fear dominate us and we're not going to move forward? I think you have, as a leader, you've got to sense, when those times are and when you're meeting so much resistance, and you have to step back and ask yourself why. Sometimes it's the customers don't really know what they want. Sometimes we haven't done enough research. Sometimes we haven't done enough exploring with, more diverse groups, not just focus groups, but more diverse groups of, customers or consumers that don't use our products. So, there's a balance. Moving forward is great, but sometimes jumping in with all fours too soon has been very costly.
Thank you. Mike, would you mind sharing one?
Yeah, I'm thinking of one specific mistake that I was a part of that was a bad hiring decision that seemed good at the time and turned out to be a bad deal. And in diagnosing how that happened, two things. One was groupthink. Very clearly there was groupthink going on. And then on my part, my mistake was not to listen to my intuition. Rationalize it away, dampen it down, talk it out of the room, so to speak. And so that's a learning for me, the danger of groupthink. And I can think of a number of mistakes that we've made that I would attribute to groupthink. You've got to be on the guard, and then also developing your intuition, which is really sort of a form of pattern recognition, and it gets better with time, certainly. And it's not error-free. I mean, sometimes your gut is not right. But just developing the ability to listen to it and make it part of that decision making. In hindsight, I wish I had done that and did not. So,
Miles?
I had a very similar situation to yours, Mike. A manager that went off the reservation, and intuitively, in my gut feeling, I thought that was the case. And yet when I made site visits to the plant and spoke with him and the staff and the production staff, the answer didn't indicate any problem. And finally the atmosphere reached a point where I decided it was going to be necessary to go spend at least a week on the property. And at that point, I finally was able to free up communication enough in the plant to find out that I really did have a leader in that plant that was inappropriate, whose management style was contrary to anything that we had ever tried to inculcate throughout the organization. And clearly, there was not a place for this person in the operation. And the departure was shortly thereafter. So my takeaway from that, I guess, would be something akin to Ronald Reagan, trust but verify. And if you think it's wrong, or if you think something's wrong, there's a good chance that you need to rely on yourself enough to know that there probably is, and you need to pursue that and ferret that problem out.
Yeah. Thank you. We appreciate that.
So Mike made me really nervous when he said a bad hire. I was like, surely he would not deliver bad news while I'm sitting in front of all of you, right? So
It resolved itself
oh,
pretty
good.
quickly.
I feel better now. So, thank you. So my next question, the question next is for Paula, and I'm a huge admirer of Paula. And the first time I met you was at an ELDC meeting, and you just returned from China, and she seemed so fearless, traveling all over the world, and it was just, I have admired her ever since. And her staff hosted a group of us from McKee at her facility to share with us their health and wellness efforts. They've just been so gracious, and they're just good people. And so my question is, what advice do you have specifically for women in the baking industry, maybe those that are just beginning their career and those maybe in the middle of their career? Any advice specifically for women?
Well, I speak to a lot of women's groups, and I think one of the fundamental concerns I hear is the work-life balance. I think that was the topic at the last convention, and so I think it's still there. It's not going away. And what I try to talk to specifically is really for everybody, but it's a Covey process that I go through every year, and it's called Building a Life Mission. And it starts with a personal mission statement, and you know, you're sitting there going, well, what does that have to do with work-life balance? Well, the personal mission process allows you to go through and determine what your own value set is and what your own core beliefs are. And once you determine that, then you build out your goals, and from that you build out your time management. So from a point of, rather than letting life drive us, we drive life. And I've actually had women call me and say, you know, that was one of the best pieces of advice I ever got, because it allowed me to decide for me where my life was going to go. And I will say, if your family and your children are your priority, or your grandchildren or whatever, you've got to reconcile that within your own body, within your own soul, within your own mind. You can't be two places at once. So when you have to make those choices, it becomes much cleaner and much clearer, and then you will align your career around a job that allows you to spend time with your family. If you want the career and that's your overriding core belief, your own core priority, and that's your value, then that will help you rid yourself of the guilt of not spending time with your family. So I know it seems, and they're really difficult choices. There's not a good choice for, especially I think for women, when we're still doing a lot of the raising the children and putting food on the table, and all of those things pull at our very core and our very soul and our very heart. So I would say, start with yourself first, decide what your value set is, and then you can let your career follow that. And I will say to every woman I ever meet, you may not be aligned with being the president of a company, or even a regional vice president, or a senior vice president, or in the high level roles. Because if family is at your core and your priority, and you want to rise to a level at a certain level in a company, and that's your aspiration, those two things do not mix. Because most women I know today that have high-level careers have a stay-at-home husband, or they have a situation where they have caretaking being provided at the home by someone other than themselves as the primary person. So it's really your personal mission that will drive your choices. I can't give anybody else my mission because it's not theirs.
That's great. Thank you.
That is such a well thought out answer.
That's
Thank you.
right.
Yeah, we can all take a lot away from that. The next question is for Mike, and working for a private family-owned company as I do, I can understand the importance of this, and it's nice that you have your daughter here as well. Could you talk a little bit about McKee's strategy for succession planning, and then strengthening the next, I guess you're into the G3 now, G4 at McKee. What's the succession planning and talking about strengthening the next generation of leaders at McKee? Sure.
Let me talk a little bit about 2 to 3G, and I'm part of the third generation in our business. And going back 10 or 15 years, 20 years probably, A couple of things. A long-term view is really important. You don't do these things quickly. Involving a family business professional was something our company did. I wasn't part of that, but some wise advisors did that. Somebody you can trust, somebody that's a third-party, objective participant in that. Getting involved with a family business organization or two, where you can rub shoulders with other family businesses and share experiences. So those are all things that our company did early and helped with our succession transition from the second to the third generation. Those in my generation had development that was rather informal in the business. When we turned 14, we started working summers. We worked through all the operational areas. But it was very much driven by our fathers and sort of informal. So that brings us to today. We're focused on the 4Gs, which would be my daughter's generation of family. And it's our hope that in 10 or 15 years that a handful of those young adults will have made a commitment to the company, put their time in, built their credibility, done the things that they need to do to take a leadership position. So today we continue with those things I mentioned, plus we've instituted a family employment policy, very specific about how a family member can join the business. We have annual family business meetings where the focus is becoming more and more on the 4Gs. In our family, they range from 16 years of age to their late 20s, and so we've got a lot of them beginning to make career decisions. We're continuing to use family business organizations and family business professionals with us. And we started having, for example, this summer we had a 2-day session on leadership development, character. They did the Myers-Briggs type thing, teamwork, and it was well attended. We didn't have 100%, but we had a nice contingent from our 4Gs. And so our program is more structured today, but a lot of the principles are the same. And our attitude is we're inviting these young adults to come in and look at the family business as a potential career, but there's no heavy pressure. We're just hoping to find that match between a few of them and the needs of the company. And so those are the things that we're into. Yeah.
Thank you, Mike. Our next question is for Miles. Dawn Food Products is a global company doing business all over the world. Would you talk a little bit about the valuable leadership skills that you see that transcend international barriers? And can you talk a little bit about what you've learned about leadership in other cultures that maybe translate to Dawn Foods and to leadership in your company?
Well, I think first, Pete, I would say that international leadership is not for everyone. It's very demanding. It's challenging. If you're not into long plane rides, it's obviously not going to be a satisfactory career selection for you. But if it's where your mindset is, it can also be a very rewarding personal experience. We would expect an international leader to go into a country and be prepared not only prior to arriving, but also after they arrive to delve into the local culture, the customs, the mores. They've got to be able to do that in order to discern what aspects of their leadership style they're going to alter to fit the local culture. Having said that, I would say that there are some things that we would not be willing to have altered, and that would be our vision and mission statements, our ethics statements, our conduct, and our behavioral guidelines that we ask everyone to follow. Those might be wordsmithed to match the local customs and expectations, but the principles would not change. And I guess I would say beyond that, I would expect the international leader to have a heavy emphasis on communication. When you're negotiating agreements, when you're just trying to negotiate work agreements, it's probably going to be necessary in many instances to have the same conversation 4 or 5 different times in 4 or 5 different ways. I guess the best example, I was speaking with Carrie, our CEO, the other day, who spends a great deal of time internationally. She said one of the first things she had to learn was, yes, when you're having a conversation with someone in that country and you're hearing the word yes, yes, yes during the conversation, don't think that that means that they agree with you. What that means is that they've heard what you had to say. And if you make that mistake of assuming that they're in agreement with you, that could lead to some very interesting outcomes with your negotiation. So,
I was thinking, Connie, maybe, Paula, would you mind talking about that a little bit? I mean, you're doing overseas work, and I was thinking about Connie's comment about China. And
Yep. And it's a special, I think, call out for women, too, because along with agreeing with exactly what you said, mission and vision, not compromised, conduct, etc. There's some countries that don't welcome doing business with women. And so I just don't go to Japan except just to meet and greet. And then I go out and other people do the negotiation. That's just a cultural norm there. So I can stay and try to fight that battle, but it's not going to work. In China, it's definitely very open to women. A lot of women over there run the families. They run companies. They're high up in the government, and so it's very common to do business with women there. Some of the Middle Eastern countries, not so much. So I think what you were saying, understanding the norms, understanding the cultural barriers, understanding some of the language, eating the food. In China, it's a very big deal when you're invited to dinner to partake in the food that they eat. And I'm telling you, sometimes those bowls have come by me and I'm like, oh, I really have to eat that? I don't want to. But they view it as, well, this partnership's going to be successful or it's not. So, and in the beginning of my relationship with my Chinese friends, there was a lot of drinking, and I don't drink a lot, so that was a big thing for me to get them to understand was, I have a designated drinker now when I go to China, so that's acceptable.
Yeah, Pete, I would just real quick, I would reinforce all of the points made because we've obviously joined Grupo Bimbo. Last 3 or 4 years.
Yes.
And I think it's really important in an international business setting to take the time to really understand the culture, the norms. It may well be the most important thing you can do before you do anything else. Because I think American business tends to be very straightforward. Run in, let's make a decision, let's get going, let's do the deal, let's move on. That is not the way it works in many other countries.
Yeah.
And if you don't understand that first, you're setting yourself up for real difficulties.
That's great.
thank you.
So Paula's taken applications. You want to be her designated drinker.
Sold right there in the front row. Yeah.
You got some takers, huh?
Be careful what you wish for. There's a lot of gombang over there.
So, Fred, the question for you is, obviously, you and Bimbo have been a strong supporter of ABA, including the PAC, and participating in a panel for the Leadership Forum, so we appreciate that. So could you talk a little bit about how you make decisions about getting involved in trade associations, and then specifically ABA, and how that's brought value back to Bimbo?
Well, I think obviously it's given our position in the industry, both in the U.S. but also globally with Grupo Bimbo. My view is we have an obligation to be not just a participant but an active participant, and that goes beyond my role. It goes to many of the key managers in our organization who serve on committees. It provides networking opportunities, obviously, but I think that maybe the most overriding and important reason to participate is, and we've talked about a number of these issues just over the last couple of days. The industry has its share of challenges and issues that we're facing, and there always will be those. And for any one company to try to deal with those on their own, to me, is very, very difficult. There's clearly strength in numbers. There's legislative expertise that ABA has that would be difficult for any single company to have on their own, in my view. So I just think we're stronger as an organization than we would be independently. And quite frankly, if anything, we need to find ways to grow ABA, make it even stronger, because I think the battles of the future are going to be challenging. We've talked about, Rob, and Rob knows this, just recently, the last couple of days, the issue of the new term of food addiction that's out there. There are 2 or 3 books out there in the New York Times bestseller list right now, some of which are trying to demonize grain-based foods. There are regulatory risks that are out there. And so the question you have to ask yourself if you're leading a company is, what's the best way for me and for my company to be able to deal with these kinds of issues? And I think trade associations, and certainly for us ABA, in my view, is the best way to do it.
That's good. And Miles, you had mentioned ABA earlier, so I'd like for you to comment as well, if you want to add anything to that, and maybe talk a little bit about, personally, ABA, the value you think that's been to you in your career, and then also to your organization.
Well, I agree with virtually everything Fred said regarding the industry. The baking industry has always been near and dear to the Jones family's heart. It's what we've always done. It's what we like to think we know quite a bit about. But one of the reasons we all like it is because it's a happy industry. We literally make things that make people smile. It's rare that you would see someone grimace eating a piece of cake or a cinnamon roll. Or so it's a great industry to be in, and we feel blessed to be a part of it. But I share Fred's concern about the threats to our industry. I think those are going to become stronger, not weaker, and hopefully not more widespread, but would not surprise me if that were the case. Hence our involvement in ABA and the PAC. It's pretty clear these days in Washington that the voice that Congress hears most often and the voice they hear most loudly is having, in most cases, the greatest impact on their decision making. We're getting some not great decisions made in Washington these days. We'd like a piece of that 6-cent sugar as much as anyone here in the room. And the taxpayers get to foot the bill for everything. That makes the PACs, in my opinion, and associations like the ABA more critical than they've ever been to our long-term survival. And I would encourage you, if you know other colleagues in the industry who are not members of the ABA and who are not contributing to the PAC, I'd encourage you to encourage them. Participate. Be a part of it. This is going to be our industry to defend in the years to come.
That's good. Good advice. So, Paula, how about you? I mentioned that when I first met you was at an ELDC meeting. So would you speak specifically about ELDC and your commitment to that? You've sent several of your managers to that committee.
Yeah, I think it's a great opportunity to meet a lot of the other bakers. But I have to say my favorite event is the Capitol Hill event. And it's not one that I think by yourself or maybe as your company that you would maybe fly to Washington and have Hill visits. But this is a rare opportunity. It's one that I know of no other trade organization or affiliation or association that does this. And to be able to walk in those halls and be with other like-minded bakers and say how many people we employ, but also to really get a feeling for if you go in to see your congressman and you're going to meet with a staffer or a junior staffer, or you're going in to see your senator and you don't see them, you see their staff, and you realize these are the people that are writing a lot of the policy changes or telling them how to vote, and they're busy doing a lot of other things, mostly out fundraising, I think. because they have to get reelected every time. But it's really quite an eye-opening experience, and it's the only time I've ever been able to do it is through my relationship with the ABA and the work that this committee does. So obviously we've got a lot of our team members getting involved on committees. In fact, our director of HR just got appointed to one of the heads of one of the committees. So we really believe in it. We're part of the environmental program, the Energy Star. I mean, all of these things are just opportunities for us to really develop our relationship within the industry and learn from others.
That's great. Thank you.
Mike McKee's been such a strong supporter of ABA and had executives and managers be part of committees, and I've been very fortunate over the last 3 years to spend time with Connie Lee co-chairing this committee. Can you talk a little bit about the benefit that comes to McKee by having employees, executives on committees?
I'll speak for myself first. Getting involved with ABA, a couple of things. Making acquaintances in the industry and maintaining those is certainly a plus. Like somebody else said, eye-opening experience to go to the Hill and kind of see it for yourself. That's very important to better understand the political and the regulatory process. In recent years, we've had a number of employees involved with committees and get more involved with the political process. And it's great to see middle-level management folks doing that. It's a form of development for them. They're experts in their field. I think they're excited to be able to go to Washington and talk to, even if they're talking to the staffers, it's a big deal. And so it's good development for them. And I think it's good for the industry to get to some of those more junior management folks involved. They come back to the company. They talk with their peers. They talk with their friends. And it heightens the sensitivity to the importance that the company is involved, and we're trying to tell our story, and the industry is involved. So it's been a great thing, and it's really grown for us. Mm-hmm. I'd say it's at the highest level today that it's been probably forever.
That's good. So Pete, you have the next question?
I think I do. We've spent time here sort of talking about the past and sort of talking about what the learnings of leadership that all of you have are currently. And I think we've got time to sort of let each one of you answer this next question as we go forward. And it's really about the future. So I think I'll start with you, Fred, if you don't mind. As you personally and you plan for your company, would you take some time sort of talking about what are the leadership opportunities and challenge that you see in your organization over the next 5 to 10 years?
Sure, absolutely. For me and for where my company is right now, it's a very timely question, timely topic. I'm sure many of you know we're a company that's in the U.S. with GB, with Grupo Bimbo, grown rather quickly through acquisitions, and I've come to realize that we're a company that's come from with people that have come from many different places. They've come from different organizations, different backgrounds, different corporate structures, some very centralized, some very decentralized, and it's obviously a large company. And so we're trying to create, as all companies want to do, a culture of the company and a certain way of working. And obviously a mission, vision, values, a set of beliefs, etc. And when you have so many associates that have come from so many different backgrounds, that's not necessarily easy. And so one of the major pieces of work that we have is figuring out how to do that and getting everybody on the bus, in effect. And I think that's critical for our success over the next 5 to 10 years and longer. Because at the end of the day, the company is really only as good as all of its people. I mean, we can buy equipment and we can build bakeries and we can change buildings. We can do all those things. But it really is all about having the right people in the organization and clearly committed to what we're trying to accomplish. The other piece of call it leadership development that we're undertaking is we're working on becoming a more, I'll say, inclusive and diverse company. And I think that's a challenge, frankly, for the broader industry to become more diverse and to become more inclusive. And I think that's one of the keys to getting to strengthening not only our company but the industry over time and bringing more people into what is a great business, but maybe isn't a business that necessarily attracts, or in the past hasn't attracted as readily more diverse and people. So I think it's one of the major initiatives that we're undertaking, along with trying to create a more consistent culture in our company. And I will say it's not easy, and it's maybe the biggest leadership challenge that any of us who run large organizations have. It's where I believe we probably need to spend the majority of our time.
Miles, would you maybe take that question up now?
Yeah, we've had many of the same experiences through acquisitions. Recently, a relatively large acquisition for us in Europe, across 7 or 8 different countries, from Portugal to literally Moscow. That's a lot of different cultures that we were not altogether familiar with, and it made our primary job, our primary responsibility to the organization, that we should put leadership on the ground there that was capable of melding all these different moving parts, seven different organizations, into the Dawn culture. And I must say that our CEO, Kerry Barber, has done an excellent job of creating a leadership team that we probably have the strongest leadership team now that we have ever had, that are doing a fine job of bringing all those organizations so that we're all marching in the same direction and all speaking the same language. That's very difficult with that many different cultures. It's a real challenge, but I see it coming together. From a futuristic standpoint, we need to be careful we don't manage from the rearview mirror. We need to be looking out 5 to 10 years to see where this industry is going to be, see what kind of people we need to have in the organization, and to make sure that those people have the adequate tools and the adequate training to be successful and to continue to make Dawn successful in this industry.
Thank you. Paula, what leadership challenges do you see over the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, we've been doing some planning in our organization. We've been looking a lot at demographics of not only the U.S. population, but the global population. And by 2030, 1 in 5 Americans is going to be 80 or north of that. So you see this aging population in the U.S. There's also the combination of the millennials, and then there's like this dip in the middle. And then you see these huge population growths in China and, the Middle East and in that area of the world. So in 20 years, the whole world's going to look very different. Mm-hmm. So I think the concept of diversity, but at the same time, I think the U.S. has a big problem right now, and that is that we're not educating ourselves. So we're falling behind in skills, in technical skills, in basic, people who want to work in our industry or want to work in manufacturing. And so I'm a huge proponent of automating equipment. I'm a huge proponent of trying to get our seniors to stay employed, to not retire, if it's part-time or whatever. We're spending as much time talking about how we keep our people that are 60 and beyond having fun and wanting to stay engaged. Then we're trying to use those folks to help mentor our millennials that are coming in that don't know if they want to stay in manufacturing or not. And so it's a very interesting time and change. So we're trying to attack it from several different ways, and some things that I don't think people are fully understanding of the fact that the population is going to change. So you have to be ready for that.
Mike?
Yeah, the question about challenges, opportunities, mine's very similar. A few years ago, we did a demographic study within our company and saw this age wave, the boomers retiring, and of course that's a little uncertain because of economic conditions. The economy's booming, they retire. If it's not, they stay, which can be a good thing. But we view that as a challenge because of the brain drain, but also an opportunity. As middle-level management has a chance to move up and take more responsibility. And so those numbers of years ago, we sort of kicked into high gear talking about development and mentoring and job rotation and succession planning. And so it kicked off a whole series of pretty high visibility efforts now to try to get ready for that. So the next 5-10 years is going to be a time of great change within our company that mirrors what you were talking about, the general demographics. So that may be our top leadership issue right now, is the rate of change.
Thank you. Kelly?
Well, great. We're running a little bit ahead of schedule, which is terrific, so we have some extra time for Q&A. We have Tim Marin and Campbell Williams with BCW Food Products, who each have a cordless microphone. So for the questions in the audience, if you'll please raise your hand, Campbell and Tim will come around and give you an opportunity to ask questions of these terrific leaders on the stage. Who has a question?
I heard a common thread during some of the discussion. I wondered if there were any books that the panelists have read that provided, during the development of your career, an aha moment.
Who wants to take that question first?
Think about that.
Any Oprah aha moments?
Well, I don't know if it's an aha moment, but Jim Collins' Good to Great is one that I've quoted a lot with our management team, and I know that's a book that's been around for a long time, but that's probably one of my favorites. I see a lot of application in our business for some of those concepts.
My dad was a big positive mental attitude guy, and so when I was in my 20s, he gave me this book called Think and Grow Rich. It's been around forever, but it's a great book to sort of teach a young person about saving versus investing versus spending and the differences as such, and where you spend your time and how much worry you do and how much stress you create on yourself is pretty undervalued time. So to convert that to a more positive frame of mind. And then I'm a big fan of Stephen Covey and obviously Dr. Deming and a lot of his books.
Yeah, I don't know that I could cite necessarily one book as an aha moment. I think you collect some of these maybe leadership traits or aha moments over your career. There is a book, it's a small book, a fairly easy read called Managing with Soul, which I think is a very interesting book to read. You can probably read it in, 2 hours, or it's a quick read. But I think it has some valuable lessons in people leadership, which I think is, I spend a lot of time thinking about, talking about, because it is what makes up companies.
I guess I haven't really taken the time to delineate any one book in particular. I know that there have been a number of aha books. There have been a few oh no books. Basically, I concentrate my reading on shorter pieces from a time constraint more than anything else, and I like to read across a broader spectrum. So I can't give you any one specific example.
My name is Jeffrey Smith. There seems to be a growing concern and worry, both in academia and in the media, about the financial industry's excessive focus on short-term shareholder value. There's a realization that this leads to cutbacks, short-term thinking, sacrifice of future value, and destruction of companies. As leaders, how do you fight back and guard against financial predators from outside our industry?
I'll take a shot. That's a challenging question. I'll take a shot. Well, in our case, we're I would say fortunate in that we're part of a company that is clearly committed to being in the baking space and very much long-term focused. And while we certainly have to, deliver our results and deliver our earnings, the decision process that we undertake is all about what's right for the company for the long term. And I think that takes away some of the kinds of financial predator risks you're talking about. I just think having a clear vision about where you want to take your business and making sure that all of the constituents understand that may well be one of the best ways to fend off precious to do things in the short term that may not be right.
Well, and if you're a closely held organization, privately held, family owned, you have to have a great deal of financial discipline, because you can't go to the equity markets like publicly traded companies can do. So the funds that you generate for investment come from your operations. And if you're not performing well, if you haven't planned well, if you're working on the wrong things, or you're working on those things the customer is not willing to pay you for, you've got a bad plan going. But I find that most successful family-owned organizations are extremely well disciplined in terms of financial planning and futuristic planning.
I think an example that I would use is when people start saying yes too much, and they get afraid of confronting their financial realities. Because if you're in a private business and you don't have unlimited capital, you have to be very courageous with customers and with team members and yourself to really ask yourself, is this going to mortgage our future? We have a tenet that our CFO and our finance guys have coined, and it's called "Don't bet the company on any one growth opportunity." So we don't ever put our whole company at risk or roll the dice to do one specific thing for someone else that we just can't. We would just crater the company if we did it. So if there's even the least little risk of that, we step back, we step away, and we say no. And it takes courage to do that. Because when you got a customer that really says, I want this, I want this, I want this, it's difficult to tell them no. But sometimes some of my best decisions have been to have the courage to say no.
Any other questions? It's a great opportunity. I have a question about mentoring. Can each of you kind of talk a little bit about, were you some influential mentors in your life, and then do you mentor up-and-coming young executives?
Well, obviously, one of my greatest friends and mentors was a gentleman by the name of W. Edward Deming, and he was kind of known in the U.S. as the father of quality, or the father of the turnaround of the car manufacturing business. And he was gruff to the point sometimes of, you'd wonder if you made him mad or something when he'd answer you. He was short, curt, but made you think an awful lot, because he never really gave you the answer. He made you think with his questions to you. And so when I have an opportunity to meet with people and mentor them, the first thing I do is give them a stack of books. And if I don't hear anything from them in a couple months, I know they weren't really interested in me mentoring them. Because if they really are interested, they're going to read the books. They're going to come back to me with questions, and they're going to say, okay, why did you give me these books? But it takes time, and you have to have as much effort. You have to want to put as much effort into your own personal development path as you want me to put into it. So you got to think about that before you ask somebody to mentor you, or before you mentor someone.
I think mentoring is a large responsibility, a prodigious responsibility. If you're talking about molding someone's mind and their attitudes that may affect their approach to problem solving and decision making in the business for years to come, that is a prodigious responsibility, as I said. I think that two very important mentors to me, especially I guess because we're a family-owned organization, one was certainly my father, Marlon Jones, who was a very conservative businessman, but also was a very sensitive and compassionate individual, not necessarily with members of the family, but with the people that he worked with. He cared a great deal about them, and he cared a great deal about his family as well. But that was a living example for me about how you can be a conservative and an intense business person, while at the same time showing this care and compassion for and wanting the people that you work with and who work in the organization to succeed and to be able to do good things for themselves and for their families. The second mentor, growing up in many ways, sometimes it got me in trouble, was my brother Ron. He has been, over the years, has had an uncanny ability to know where Dawn Foods should be and about when they should be there. And his batting percentage has been really quite high, and it's been a terrific trip in my personal career to work with my brother Ron.
Either one of you want to take that question?
I'd quickly add, we've certainly all I've had mentors over the years. I think one of the interesting things about mentoring to me is that some of the most effective mentoring is informal mentoring. Sometimes, and I've had this experience in companies, there's often a desire to set up a quote-unquote formal mentoring program, and I think that's a very difficult thing to do, actually, because if it doesn't feel natural and comfortable to be speaking with someone or asking them some tough questions or asking for some career advice, it's probably not going to be very effective. And so I guess I'd encourage for those who are seeking a mentoring program of some type, first, you've got to take responsibility for your own career development because no one's going to do it for you. And secondly, seek out mentors that you truly have a comfort level with, talking about where you want to take your career and what you're trying to accomplish. I think it's worked in my experience, and so that'd be what I'd offer.
Well said.
Yeah, I don't know that I only started using the word mentoring recently, but thinking about my career being in a family business, a lot of the management folks sort of understood it was part of their job to help do development for those of us that are family members kind of moving through. So I could think of a number of individuals that play that important role. I didn't call it mentoring. We didn't think of it as mentoring. It was just sort of developing me for the future. And then I think about my role in the past. Again, I wasn't thinking in terms of mentoring, but picking out somebody with high potential and just making a point to try to get with them and spend some time with them and express some interest in their career and again, probably like mentoring, but not being called mentoring.
So what makes someone stand out as having high potential in your eyes?
Yeah, speaking to me specifically? Yeah. I think of somebody that's willing to step outside their role, but do it in the appropriate way. That assertiveness, willingness to take on more. Curiosity. Somebody that expresses a lot of curiosity about how the business works. And they certainly have to have that sort of emotional intelligence, know how to connect with people, crossways up and down in the organization. So, I hate to say you know it when you see it, but a lot of times that's the way it is.
Yeah. One of the most rewarding things I think you can have, one of the most rewarding experiences you can have is seeing someone who you has to join the company at an entry-level position and seeing them grow sensationally in the organization to positions of upper management. It's really a neat feeling to watch them, to nurture them, and to watch them succeed and grow. And then, in most cases, they turn around and do the same thing for others that they're working with.
Great. Any other questions? In the back? The microphone's coming.
Thank you. My name is Michelle Abeck. I just wanted to ask the panel to comment on the speed of innovation in the baking industry as it relates to the long-term health of the industry.
Great question. Who wants to take that one? You heard the question?
Yeah.
I'll take a little stab at it right now. I think what you said about the Atkins, it's like sometimes we can be so fast that, we're on the wrong, it's not a trend yet. It's a fad. And so I think it's really a hard question to answer about the speed of innovation, because you could innovate into a fad and then, you find yourself financially drained because you're not selling the products. So I'm a huge fan of research. I'm a huge fan of coupling research with our culinary folks, our product development folks, our quality folks. I mean, I've got, a table full of guys here that'll tell you I'm always, shoving research under people's faces because, some of these things like gluten, I'll just take gluten-free, for example. Who's to say if that's a fad or a trend? Who's to say if whole grain is a fad or a trend? We're starting to see things trend out more in the whole grain area versus the gluten area, because I think there's still a lot to be determined about what is gluten-free. And I think when it all gets shaken out, we may not be making as much gluten-free stuff as we think we are because the regulations are going to shift. So I think there's a good balance of watching these things over time. And then you don't have to rush to market because you've been working on these things all along, and then you have a shelf of test items that you want to take down. It shouldn't be a fire drill, in my opinion. Innovation should be something that's watched and worked on over a long-term period.
Yeah, I think what I'd add is that there's clearly a greater focus on health and wellness, and a desire among consumers to eat healthier. It gets expressed in a lot of different ways. It might be gluten-free, and that may be around for a while. It might not. Mm-hmm. It might be organic. I think from our perspective, what we need to try to do is improve the nutritional profile of our products over time, but do it in a way that still delivers on consumer expectations for quality and taste and the things that they're looking for. But I don't think we're going to see a shift away from consumers wanting to eat healthier, have healthier products. And they're certainly being given an awful lot of advice in that regard, not all of which is correct, but they're getting a lot of advice. So I think innovation focus, I do think, has to be in the health and wellness arena.
I would agree. I think if we ignore that, we ignore it at our peril, our long-term peril. So I would agree with it.
Well, great. Well, thank you once again for supporting ABA's Executive Leadership Development Committee and our ELDC Industry Forum here at IBIE. As I fully anticipated, our distinguished panel did not disappoint. Listening to Paula and Fred and Miles and Mike, it reminds me of why the baking industry and business is so exceptional, and we're all fortunate to work together. So thank you all so much for doing such a terrific job tonight. And before we leave, we have one more brief presentation. But can I have our sponsors stand up one more time, please, if you sponsor this evening? We thank you so much for your help. And now I'm going to turn the program over to ABA President and CEO Rob Mackey for a special presentation.
Thank you, Kelly. What a terrific panel. I know that Kelly doesn't really take a lot of credit on this, but she's been working very hard over the last several months to put together this panel and has done an outstanding job. So, Kelly, congratulations. You know, I just jotted about 3 pages of notes and takeaways that I learned. We were talking about learnings from this group, and I really appreciate you sharing. We are so blessed as an industry. We have humble leaders of great integrity that really are willing to share some of their ideas and concepts and learnings that, and very frank. I mean, we talked about mistakes, we talked about challenges and opportunities, and I think that speaks volumes to this industry. And there are a lot of challenges, and I remain confident that with leaders like this and the folks in the room, the folks that have been leaders in their companies for many years, and the next generation of leaders, that we're going to solve those challenges and we're going to really address those very successfully. I think it is also, as we're talking about leadership, it's very important that we recognize one other leader of the industry that most of you know personally and have gotten to know over many years. This person embodies the humble, dedicated, principled leadership of our panel tonight. Almost exactly 20 years ago, Lee Sanders joined ABA. Been a long day. Lee Sanders joined the ABA after serving with distinction on Capitol Hill and at the White House. And since that time, I know of no more passionate advocate on behalf of this industry than Lee Sanders. She believes every day she gets up and she comes in and she believes in this industry and the people in this industry. And I can tell you, having watched it up close and personal, Lee has charmed many a policymaker with her very soft Southern accent. But let me just say this, behind that soft Southern accent is a steel rod, if you will, and when needed, that comes out in the face of some very misguided policymakers. And to watch that up close has been pretty impressive. And I would tell you, watching her go toe-to-toe with the chief policy person at the White House recently, where they were very misguided, was actually a little fun to watch, and I think that Lee got the best of that exchange in promoting this industry's products. Lee is a recognized expert and leader in this industry. In her Washington business community, the food industry in Washington look to Lee for guidance, direction, and wisdom, and we are very blessed and fortunate to have her. She's been recognized countless times with industry awards, most influential in the baking industry, the Baking Management Influential 20, Baking and Snack Leadership, and the AAC Mike Bastian Award for Leadership and Contributions to the Baking Industry. I've had the great privilege and the honor to work closely with Lee for many years. I've seen her tireless efforts on behalf of this industry, and she has been an incredible partner for me in fighting on your behalf in Washington, and I count on her as my strength and my guidance and my right-hand person. Let me just tell you a little case in point, and I know it's been a long day, but I would like to share a couple of stories with you where we saw that up close. First, if you'll recall, a couple of years ago during the peanut butter recall, it was crazy times going on. The FDA really had no idea what was going on. And we had a call on a Saturday morning from a member out west who said, I've got FDA at my doorstep. They want to come in and they want to shut me down. So Lee jumped on the phone. She talked to the key folks in Washington at the FDA, and over about 3 or 4 hours got them to call the inspector that was in the field and got them to back down. As it turned out, they weren't even sourcing their peanut butter from the company that was impacted and was the source of all that. So in about 3 or 4 hours, Lee's grim determination to make sure that we could keep that plant open succeeded, and so they did not shut down. And I can only imagine what it would have cost that company to close that plant, even for a day. Similarly, we had the trans fat. If you recall this a few years ago, we had the trans fat labeling ban, and we worked very closely with FDA to try to get that modified for our products. And then we were hearing from a lot of members about the millions of dollars of packaging that they had in the warehouse that they were going to have to literally throw away if the FDA didn't give us a little bit of flexibility. And working with a few members, as the clock was ticking down to a January 1st deadline over the Christmas holiday on December 29th, we got a hold of the FDA General Counsel, and unfortunately he was bedridden in Montana, and Lee helped get him on the phone, and we ended up negotiating literally hours before the deadline would have gone into effect, an extension which gave the industry a huge savings and a huge relief, and again, countless tens of millions of dollars in relief. That's the kind of determination that Lee has shown and brings every day on your behalf. So, finally, I'd like to say, as we've heard a lot from our leaders tonight, the importance of reaching back and bringing those folks along and doing development and bringing people along. Lee took it upon herself in an industry, and let's be honest, it's been pretty heavily male-oriented over the years, and it's nice to see some of the changes, Paula, that are coming that you talked about. But Lee gathered a group of women. They decided to put together something called the Society of Bakery Women to create a forum where women in the industry could come together, network and strategize and work on their career developments, and deserves a lot of credit for bringing that organization forward. So with that, I'd like to ask Society of Bakery Women, past chair and co-founder, Teresa Cogswell, to come up and say a few words. Teresa?
Well, I have had the honor of working with the ABA for over 20 years, and for 20 of those years with Lee. And there's a theme with what I'm going to tell you tonight, because the same words come up when you describe Lee. Over the years, managing regulatory compliance and food safety, the things that typically kept me up at night, we had, I think it was about 10 or 12 years ago, the food inspectors kind of went awry. And we had the bakery manager in one of our Southeast bakeries, clear at the very tip, call and say, "We have a serious problem. We have the Border Patrol coming in to inspect the bakery, and they have drawn their guns." So the second call after legal was to Lee. And very similar to the conversation that I had with, that Rob just had, Lee was able to get on the phone, find the right people, take an overzealous Border Patrol agent, put the guns back in the holsters, and figure out what food inspection was truly about. As we know with the shutdown today, there's nothing sensible in Washington, and Lee Sanders is a very smart and intelligent person who has the ability to make some sense in Washington. I felt really good, Fred, I'm not going to lie, because I was taking some notes as our speakers were talking, and I had written on my piece of paper the same phrase that Fred used, which was legislative expertise. There is no one in the room that can tell you you are dead wrong with a smile on her face and have you say thank you better than Lee Sanders. I can also tell you from a personal perspective, whose daughter worked in D.C. for 4 years in the inner city, that when I could tell you where I was sitting in my car at what stoplight, my daughter had found a place she thought she was going to live, and Lee drove by it for me to make sure it was safe. And I was on the way to work in the morning. It was about 6:30 or 7, probably 7:30 her time, and she says, "She can't live there. She cannot live there, and if she says anything to you, you have her call me." So 4 years of my daughter living in the inner city made Mom a lot more comfortable because of the integrity and the friendship of Lee Sanders. Lee cares about people. Lee cares about the baking industry, and we are better because of it. Thank you.
I'd like to ask ABA Chairman Robin Alton to come up and say a few words. Oh, come on.
Thanks, Rob. This is the fun part of the job, too. And as he said, I'm ABA chairman. That means I have the highest job that's not paid. But Lee does have a paid job at ABA, and it's people. It's a small organization, and it's great people like Lee that makes Rob look good, because she's working so hard all the time. And she's working on behalf of the whole organization. I mean, we have a rock star cast up here of leaders, and they think you all came to see them. But in truth, a lot of you I know are here to see Lee, because we leaked it to a lot of people that she was going to get this award. 20 years working for ABA, and she's done an outstanding job for us. Just an outstanding job. And as everybody's reiterated here, certainly listening to our rock star cast here, the one thread that went through it was you have to have good people. You mentor them, you develop them, you bring them up. You know, we're talking 4G. Everybody said, you know, it's just an organization unless you have great people. And that's true of ABA too. And that's why Lee has been so strong and so good for ABA. And anybody that's worked with her, as I have, they'll know exactly what Rob was saying. She's so prepared every time you go in. And don't try and talk to her if you only have a modicum of information, because she will just run right over you in a short order. So it's been a lot of fun working with her.
Great.
Thanks.
Don't go anywhere.
Okay.
So with that, we have a small token of our appreciation on behalf of ABA, and would ask Lee to come up, and so that we have to present a small gift. Lee Sanders. You're not going to be surprised, or you will be surprised. We have a very special gift, and you're not going to be able to see it because it's too small, but good things come in small packages. We have a gold medallion with the ABA logo that we usually give to the chairman's spouse, and we thought it was totally appropriate that Lee Sanders to wear this with great pride everywhere that she goes. ABA is in her heart, and now ABA will be close to her heart. So Lee, congratulations.
Thank you so much. This means so much to me. That I have grown up in this industry. I have so many friends, mentors, and colleagues here, and I'm just overwhelmed. Been very surprised. Wow. But thank you all. I've enjoyed working with all of you. I look forward to working with all of you moving forward. And I think some of the things that were said here tonight are so important. And we all have passion for this industry. It shows. It shows on the show floor. It shows here in the room and the discussions that we have. And giving back to that industry for the next generation is so important. So that would be the message I might leave with you all, is to give it back.
Great. We'll come down to get pictures. So with that, I would ask you, we have a special cake in the back. It wouldn't be a baking event without cake. So we have I'm sorry, here comes the cake and not in the back. So please come up and have a piece of cake, and please spend a little bit of time with Lee. Thank you and good night.